I'm Huples Kittens. Welcome to the Stanford Prison Experiment, Part 2. More discussion, more analysis by me, and who funded it and why. This one's really going to surprise you.
On the first day, I said, this is not going to work. I mean, the guards felt awkward giving orders, and they'd say, okay, line up, repeat your numbers, and the prisoners start giggling.
Hey, I don't want anybody laughing. 3, 2, 1.
And then a very interesting thing happened. Dave Eshelman, who the prisoner's named John Wayne, like he's a Wild West cowboy, he begins to be more extreme.
Why? Zimbardo told him to act this way. This invalid and unethical research for decades has been held up as a wonderful piece of research in psychology. Zimbardo's research history should have warned people.
I see in the future that you do work when you're told. Thanks. Say it again. Thank you, sir. Say bless you, correction officer.
I was sort of fascinated myself that people were believing the act, and I was trying to see how far I could take it before somebody would say, okay, that's enough, stop.
Somebody would be Zimbardo, but, quote, believing the act, end quote, here is the key phrase. Demanding the responses is not a great way to find valid responses in science. As I mentioned in the first video, this entire experiment was both unethical and invalid, but did the prisoners also not act?
We did have to do things like push-ups, we would have to sing things. At the beginning, we protested some of the actions, we did things to irritate the guards.
Why? Who told them to irritate the guards? Why would you irritate the guards? Would you irritate the guards on day 2?
If I gotta be in here, I'm not gonna put up with any of your shit.
So the guards' authority was challenged right off the bat. And the guards had to decide how they were going to handle that, and they had to decide it without our input. I mean, again, this was not a Milgram study in which we were standing over them telling them what to do.
But yet they spent a full 24 hours before the prisoners arrived educating the guards. They briefed the guards, they guided the guards, they let the guards set up the experimental conditions. The guards honestly felt that they were researchers, not subjects. This is a key thing. The chief researcher Zimbardo was there throughout the experiment, but he decided he would be the prison governor. Prison governor is firmly on the side of the guards. The prison governor is not a neutral figure. The chief researcher should be very neutral in an experiment.
And they began to see the prisoners' behavior as a kind of an affront to their authority, and they began to push back.
We would ramp up the general harassment, just sort of crank it up a bit. Nobody was telling me I shouldn't be doing this. The professor is the authority here. You know, he's the prison warden. He's not stopping me.
This is unbelievable. They took our clothes. Hands off the door.
There was the first evening a kind of rebellion that took place.
The prisoners rebelled. They barricaded themselves in their cells and said, we refuse to come out. They took off their numbers. They didn't want to be de-individuated. They started cursing the guards to their face. And the key turning point was the guards began to think of them as dangerous prisoners.
Okay, how so dangerous? This is a paid experiment. In reality, America outside of this experiment in 1971 was full of absolute terrible conflicts. The guards have batons and the prisoners are locked up. This supposed rebellion the first night fits the script, as we shall see.
So what Zimbardo's research demonstrates so dramatically is that situations can affect us more than we think, and can often outweigh individual characteristics. So if we're going to use psychology to try to reduce the possibility for evil, maybe we need to focus more on systems and less on individuals. But should the research ever have been done? After all, the participants suffered real harm.
No, but there was no harm if everyone's actually acting. The results were written in advance for this study. This study wasn't science, nor was it ethical if we are to believe the researcher and the participants' stories. What does Zimbardo think about this 3 decades later?
In hindsight, again, I have mixed feelings about the study. Should it have been done? Well, not if it means suffering of anybody. Would I like my son to have been in that study? No. On the other hand, does it tell us something vital about human nature that has enduring value? There I have to say yes. It's been used in lots of prisons. It's a training device to get people to be sensitized to how easy it is to abuse power. So in that sense, it has widespread enduring value. Therefore, I'm saying, well, I'm glad I did it.
Hold on a minute, you could use this as a justification for the scientific experiments Germany did on people in prison camps in the 1940s. It's not ethical, it's not a justification. But it also made him very famous. It also made some of the participants famous. Paid interviews, books, and generalized fame alter how we think about our own history. Certainly the years leading up to the 2016 film on this experiment would have been strong motivation to continue sticking to the storyline.
I had really thought that I was incapable of this kind of behavior. I was surprised, even no, I was dismayed to find out that I could really be that I could act.
Act. Over and over the participants state act. It explains how they went from equals to polar opposites in 48 to 72 hours.
In a manner so absolutely unaccustomed to anything I would even really dream of doing. And while I was doing it, I didn't feel any regret. I didn't feel any guilt. It was only afterwards when I began to reflect on what I had done that this behavior began to dawn on me, and I realized that this was a part of me I hadn't really noticed before.
Zimbardo wanted the experiment to show that de-individualization is rapid and easily obtained. This explains why his guards had no individuality or ethics other than the fake John Wayne cowboy figure. It also explains the lack of individuality or independence from all of the remaining prisoners within 72 hours. Okay, so was there actually anything worth saving from the Stanford Prison Experiment? The American Psychological Association Ethics Guidelines sprang from the Stanford Prison Experiment and other awful human experiments. So all psychological experiments, all human experiments in whatever field now have to not harm the people being investigated. For example, the Tuskegee syphilis study looked at black males who had and didn't have syphilis. The infected were not treated for syphilis when a cure was found in 1936. The doctors and researchers let them be untreated until 1972 to see what would happen. The racism and appalling treatment of human beings in a science experiment by everybody associated with that, and there was a lot of people associated with it, show that ethical guidelines need to be written down and enforced. However, one of the specific benefits of the Stanford Prison Experiment was to show that young offenders were very much at risk from abuse if they were in prison. From this moment on, the move to remove young offenders from adult jails happened. It also showed people should never ever volunteer for psychology experiments, though films should have already led us to this conclusion. In the end, Zimbardo got what he wanted from the 6 days of this experiment. He proved that people in groups almost always will lose their individuality as soon as they put on uniforms and play roles, as long as the roles are very bipolar opposite. This could happen to you, this could happen to me. In 48 to 72 hours, we can go from being nice people to being literally concentration camp guards. Even worse, within 72 hours, we become mindless zombie prisoners in that situation. I find that unlikely. For me, this experiment wasn't about de-individualization. It was about finding methodologies to have prison guards lose their individuality and treat prisoners as non-human. Why on earth would anybody want to do an experiment to have prison guards treat prisoners as subhuman? Why would you want prison guards that have no ethics and don't show any kindness to the prisoners? Who would want that? Well, the United States Navy's Office of Naval Research is who would want that. They funded the Stanford Prison Experiment, but they have now erased all traces of that experiment from their public website. They've removed all traces that they hired Zimbardo and paid him to do the Stanford Prison Experiment, despite it being one of the most famous psychological experiments of all time. Now, in 2024, oddly enough, the United States Navy continues to run one of the world's most notorious prisons, where the detained are not encouraged to be individuals or seen by their guards as individuals. Coincidence? I'll let you decide. Well, I hope you enjoyed this set of 2 videos. Just remember, the Stanford Prison Experiment is junk science. It has no validity at all in the real world. Whatever conclusions you want to draw from it, the conclusion that the prison experiment worked is not one. Why would it be so heavily embraced by pretty much everybody in psychology and the media? Well, the 1960s-1970 counterculture was so strong that York University in Toronto, when it built a new building, built it so tanks could go up into the building in case the students occupied the building. Counterculture was aggressive and real. The demonstrations in 2024 are nowhere near as extremely violent as they were in the 1960s and 1970s. If you're in the police or you're in the government, or even if you're a psychologist, if you're in the normal range of people in America, isn't it comforting to know that all of these lawless hippies within 48 to 72 hours in the right circumstances can be broken and become normal, obeying citizens? However, when the hippies grew up and became old people, most of them did become mindless consuming zombies.
Class, and why don't we talk about class? Have I mentioned to you that 60% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck? That's certainly working class. How come we don't talk about class in America?
The uber wealthy have a lot of political power, and if we started talking about class more often, probably open up more people's eyes to the issues that might threaten their wealth.
Good. More discussion. Why don't we talk about it more? Yeah.
Because then we might unionize.
Well, that's a good point. All right. I think your point is well taken. If we start talking about class, then what we learn is that you have some people who have enormous wealth and power, and you have other people who are struggling. And then people are going to say, well, what can we do to improve that situation, and how do we do it together? That's what a union is. A union basically is saying that I can't do it myself. I need to work with other people to have a contract with my employer that gives me better wages and working conditions and other benefits. So I think that point is well taken.
Thanks for watching. If you like this video, please share it and give me a recommend. Give me a thumbs up even. Thank you for watching again. I appreciate it. Toodles. This has been a Well-Prepared Terrier 2024 production. Oh, and it's okay to be skeptical, but don't delude yourself. Don't make the world fit your version of reality. Be open. See what happens. Oh, if you see a human being being treated unethically in your place of work, speak up.
Talk about
This has been a 2024 Little Terrier production.